everyone. It's a pleasure and an honor to invite on board Charlotte Benson. To start off, the list of her achievements in astrology is astounding and a long one at that. She has been practicing astrology for a period longer than I was born, nearly 50 years. She's been the part of American Federation of Astrologer, the current president of ACVA, American Council of Vedic Astrology. She has been the president of Emerita, Arizona Society of Astrologers, 5 times over, and that has been one of the oldest associations of its kind ever. And she has got Jyotish Kovid. She's a Jyotish Kovid from ICAS India, that is Indian Council of Astrological Sciences. She's also the award winner, the awardee of Jyotish Chudamani from Raman Foundation, Bangalore. This is just a small part of her repertoire that I have to say. There's a huge list on her website, www.charlottebenson.com. If you would like to visit for consultation or reading any articles, please do so. Charlotte, a warm welcome to you, a very hearty welcome to you.
Thank you. Likewise, I'm delighted to be here with you, Anuradha.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for accepting the invitation to come on this platform. So she's been so you are, Charlotte, a contributor for the Jyotish Star.
Yes.
So what kind of articles are you really interested in? And before I go on to that, what attracted you to Vedic astrology in a time when it was unheard of? Today, people are going all berserk and it's easy to connect. But in those times, in 1972, when you started off, it was unheard of. Somebody living in the West practicing Eastern astrology. How did you and why did you do that?
Well, I'll make this as concise as I can. I have to admit, dear, that I started off as a Western astrologer, because the point that you make back in the late 1960s and the early 1970s, even back then there were only 5 or 6 Western astrology books available, and those were written 50 years earlier. So my initial contact with astrology was, I think, that associated with my father in the 1950s used to take us kids outside at night, and he would show us where the stars and the planets were. We were looking for Sputnik, So I just sort of inherited a connection between, made an initial connection just by actually seeing the planets. And I think that just that visual connection that I had between Jupiter and Mars or whatever I was looking at really started the process. Maybe that goes too far back, but I just became the first astrology book I ever read. It made perfect sense to me. Just that the planets have an influence, that the stars actually emit an influence. And I was just lucky enough to be able to devote my time as a practitioner from a very early start. I just immediately started practicing with clients at a very early age. And but the very first contact I had with a Jyotish book was a tiny little book on sports gambling that and they were
of all things.
Horse racing and trading cotton seeds for oil. Now, none of that made any sense to me, but I was immediately attracted to this little book. And they certainly didn't define whatever terms they were using. I still remember not knowing what Teji and Mondi mean, but then speeding. So I practiced Western astrology because I didn't know any better for a couple decades until I met B.V. Raman in the San Francisco Bay Area in 1993, I think. But as soon as I discovered formal Jyotish, I immediately knew that is what I'd been looking for the previous 25 years. So without any hesitation, it wasn't that difficult to make that switch. You just had to make sure you had the house rulerships properly organized. And from then on, my practice really was even more successful because, of course, if you're using the right sidereal placements, you can make better predictions. So I was just, a lot of this was just luck. A lot of it is just having 4 planets in Pisces in my 10th house. What else am I going to do with that except become a Jyotishi? Thank God for Jyotish. I don't know what would have happened to me otherwise.
That's a very, very, that you're just watering down a lot of your achievements with that, but then definitely you have done a lot of work, a body of work, to be going through with such a lot of process. One thing I would like to ask you is that about the topic that you picked up today is the Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune, and connecting it with certain deities. Do these planets have, time and again people have asked if Vedic Jyotish does have a connect with these planets first, and do they have a mention in any of the texts?
Well, there is in Brihat Parashara Horashastra, there is a mention of the three planets that would serve during the Kali Yuga to help Jyotishis of this era. And they certainly were not named. And I think that there were probably 6 shadow planets that were mentioned in BPHS, as I so respectfully call it. But whether this is Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto is a matter of scholarly debate, I suppose. I did give a lecture on the use of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto at in London recently at the British Association of Vedic Astrology, and I have to say some of the purists in the audience were objecting to this. But I have to say that my training as a Western astrologer, I used to be able. Now I've been a full-time consultant all this time. I haven't written books. I don't teach classes. I mean, I am by referral or repeat clients only. I never advertise anywhere. I mean, I have a website. You've seen it. But it does, in any case, what I mean, my point is that I could do such good predictive work and get all my work through referrals, making accurate predictions, a lot of which was through the influences of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. I used to be able to, I could talk for a half an hour on a transit of Uranus in a person's natal chart. So, whether they're supported by the Vedas or not, they definitely work. I mean, they are supported by the Vedas. But I also remember having the funniest conversation I had with a great Jyotishi who's recently passed, Dr. William Levesey, the previous president of our college. And I remember speaking with him about the outer planets, and he was not a fan. He said, well, Pluto was only discovered in 1930. How does anybody know how they work? And, okay, yes, we haven't observed them for thousands of years, but they do work. I mean, anybody who's been touched by Pluto, 15 seconds later, what happens. So,
okay.
Anyway, there's some controversy about this, but not in my mind.
So we'll go with that thread, and I would like to ask, how do you associate these deities with these planets?
Well, they seem to have the same personalities in a certain way, if we can call it right. The effect of so if we just start with the if we just look at Uranus, well, so Uranus is actually a very creative force, because Uranus is the planet of the unknown future, and that's I'll give you an aside, Anuradha. My work is with clients. I see clients across my desk or on Skype or however every day of the week, and so I have to describe these concepts in very simple forms. I actually teach my clients about the planets as we're talking about their effects. So I would just simply say that Uranus is a very creative planet. And when you're contacted by Uranus, it means that you break away from the past and your own boundaries, and it's really quite a sudden creation. I think Uranus is also associated with Prajapati, who is the same concept of
Creation.
creation and freedom. My favorite concept of Uranus is freedom from the known. And that's a very valuable thing. But I love this image you have here of Uranus Anuradha. Uranus is really quite the eccentric of the solar system. It rotates backwards on its own axis. It's tilted at that big angle. It's just, Uranus just does its own thing. And so when you find that wherever that falls in your own chart, you'll see that there's a lot of eccentricity there. It's quite fun. I like it.
Okay. So eccentricity, when you mentioned that, I have also found that with Lord Brahma, since deities happen to be a favorite with me, you can call it that I have been fed on a staple diet of deities living and growing up in India. So,
yeah.
So yes, eccentric, Lord Brahma is eccentric, and creative. He's the creative force of the universe, of the Trinity of gods. So the lot of qualities, as you said, of Brahma and Uranus do take shape, and they intermingle, and they have a lot in common to that. So we go on to the next is Neptune and Varuna. So how would you describe Neptune?
Oh, Neptune, beautiful Neptune. Well, Neptune is the ascetic planet. Neptune, all the planets have spiritual qualities, of course. But if we had to just say that one planet represented spirituality as a concept, then it would definitely be Neptune. Now, you can tell right off the bat that I'm a Westerner. So, and my clients are mainly Westerners as well. So, if they're not coming to me for spiritual guidance necessarily, they want to know about the practicalities of life. But when I see that they are being influenced by Neptune, or that there's a real Neptune combination with planets in their birth chart, I definitely mention to them that this being the planet of spirituality, that that the best use of this is to cultivate their spiritual practice. Now, some people that I talk to, business people, they go, spiritual practice? What? I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't want to hear this. Never mind. But Neptune is the planet of meditation. Neptune is the planet of the superconscious world, the subconscious world, the quantum universe, the mind of God, the Akashic records, however we want to describe spirituality. I know it's a broad concept, but that's what Neptune does. Now, Neptune is the planet also, I would call, of boundlessness. Now, as a spiritual concept, that's beautiful because there's no boundary between us and God. But, one has to handle Neptune very, very carefully. Neptune is Neptune has a very broad portfolio. Neptune is the planet of the divine. As you can see this beautiful image of Varuna here, meditating on the ocean. And that is really lovely. I can barely continue my sentences while I'm looking at this representation of Varuna. But what I was going to say is that since Neptune is the planet of boundlessness, I have to remind my clients that are under that influence to create boundaries. And Neptune can also be, oddly enough, I don't know how to connect it with the deity of Varuna, but Neptune can be very self-destructive in a neglectful way. Neptune has to do with benign neglect or self-sacrifice. Okay, so self-sacrifice is a wonderful thing, depending on what one is sacrificing their self for. But, Neptune is the planet also, this is what I tell my clients, the planet of illusion, delusion, confusion,
Oh,
deception.
it's beautiful. It's so beautiful. Because I'd like to add here that you've
Mm,
so very well said that, Varuna and Neptune, because Varuna is the king of the oceans, which is endless and
right.
boundless. But again, Varuna does create boundaries of, Varuna gives you boundaries of discipline, it gives you boundaries of your protocol, and it is the one through which it is the Varuni as well as the nectar. That is the spirits as well as the nectar both came out from. So Varuna is the one that gives you the ability to choose between the two during the Sagar Manthan. So it gives you an ability to choose between the two, hoping against hope that you would choose the latter, that is the nectar auxiliary of life, the divinity, and that moving ahead instead of the spirits are moving in the baser levels, and then it would come to punish you. As you said, it is a planet of contradictions which can punish you also. So otherwise, then Varuna would be so much to punish you.
Well, Varuna, I mean, excuse me, rather, the influence of Neptune, typically it means that a person would set themselves up to punish themselves.
Yeah.
And again, the fact that Neptune has such a broad portfolio, Neptune is the planet both of poisons and elixirs. So, it's a matter of balance as well, isn't it?
Yes,
But
exactly.
but it's also very creative in an artistic way, because it's also the planet of inspiration. If it's going to take you to an alternate reality or an alternate universe, this is typically very prominent in the horoscopes of artists, or people that are intentionally connected with a higher world. Or since I'm from the West, I have to sometimes use euphemisms. If I'm talking to a scientist in my office, I would say, well, Neptune is the planet of the quantum universe, or the quantum field, and
Right.
they're okay with that. But that it naturally follows. It seems to me.
Okay. So yeah, that's a very beautiful connection, and the qualities that you're mentioning for Neptune fall so much in the preview of Satabhisha Nakshatra, which is again ruled by Varuna. So ultimately, all of them fall so much, which is again in Aquarius, the sign of paradoxes. So it is falling so much in tandem with one another. No wonder you chose Varuna to represent this particular planet of Neptune.
Well, I would think that would be the generally accepted a correlation between those two planets. And Anuradha, you might know at this point that Neptune is transiting through the constellation of Aquarius now. So
So we get to speak so much about it. Yes.
yeah, yes.
So we finally come to KUBERA.
That's a beautiful image of Pluto. Wow. So, well, but so if I take over the description of Pluto, the effects of Pluto, I'll just start there and just give just of some of the brief qualities of Pluto. Pluto is according to my observations of a long time, Pluto is the most powerful planet in the solar system, no matter what the astronomers say. I have to justify looking at Pluto. Of course, the sun is, yes, the sun is the Raja of our entire solar system. But in terms of the effects of Pluto, Pluto is the planet of birth and death and rebirth, birth and death and rebirth. So it's also the planet of real wealth. I tell my clients, Venus is the planet of money, Jupiter is the planet of wealth, Pluto is the planet of real wealth. And, we even have a word for it, plutocrats. Pluto is the planet of influence and affluence. But it's also psychologically the planet of shadow issues. And that could get pretty complicated. But, here in the West, my clients like to have a bit of these psychological, looking at their psychological underpinnings. So wherever I find Pluto falling in their horoscope, whatever house that's in, or whatever whatever planets are connected with Pluto, there are very complex issues there of obsession and compulsion. But you have a lovely smiling KUBERA here. That's but you know that, as you mentioned, KUBERA is very strict, and Pluto is also very strict. You know, thank goodness Pluto moves so slowly that he doesn't show up as an agitator very often. But when it does, then your world is rocked and changed forevermore.
One question here I'd just like to ask. Do people with a very strong Pluto have a tendency to show off?
To show off?
Yes.
Well, no, my initial instinct is to say no. No, actually, pretty much the opposite. Simply because Pluto is very secretive, yes. When I see that in a person's chart, I would tell them that they're such a private person. They could be private to the extent that they could actually be perceived as being secretive too. You know, Pluto is very far out there in the solar system. We also have to look at, you know, the qualities, the astronomical qualities of these planets per se. And Pluto's out there, not connected with things. So showing off, I don't think so. They will, and as a matter of fact, well, Pluto can be obsessive compulsive. Pluto can drive a person with motivations that they don't actually understand. Since Pluto is the planet of shadow issues, yeah, if a person is acting out, as we would say, it might be associated with Pluto, but showing off, I would normally associate with Jupiter.
Okay, that's a wonderful take, and that's a different take on Jupiter. We'll explore it some other time. So as you just said, it is a planet of real wealth. Yes, it should be, because KUBER is the treasurer of the universe. He is the treasurer of the gods and the universe. So if not Pluto, then who is be the planet of real wealth? Definitely not Venus and Jupiter if we go by the 9 + 3 planets.
Yeah, well, Pluto qualifies for that, but it's also not just not just financial or material wealth. Once you're transformed by Pluto, then you have the type of spiritual wealth and understanding about yourself that will serve you for the rest of your life. You know, it might almost kill you in the process, but you know, once you've learned that lesson, you never forget it. I mean, it is to be hoped. Of course, we see plenty of mature people that have endured, contacts from Pluto, who are still
reeling under it.
Yes, but you know, everybody encounters Pluto
one time or the other.
Occasionally.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think that they're a very valuable addition to for practicing Jyotishi, to look at both in the position in the birth chart and in the transits.
So, Charlotte, can we use a chart? Can we see through a chart for a better understanding from the practical point of view?
I hope so.
So, okay, we're going to take up the chart of Michelangelo here.
Okay.
And let's see how it works, because Michelangelo, I will have to annotate it here, I have to write it here. Michelangelo has a retrograde Neptune in the 12th house.
Okay.
Retrograde Uranus in the 11th house, and retrograde Pluto in the 10th house. So how do we take it up from here?
Well, that's a very good question. But here's just as an observation. So the outer planets spend most of their time retrograde there. So I mean, quite frankly, as a practitioner, I don't even comment on whether either any of those 3 planets are retrograde. So, because they're retrograde so often. But what's more interesting, so for instance, is a combination with these outer planets. So the first one I can see, having looked at this for exactly 90 seconds, is the fact that he has that Michelangelo had Uranus directly opposite Venus. Well,
Yes.
now that's I mean, that's interesting on the face of it. Of course, there is Venus there in the 5th house, and it's very creative, and Uranus in the 11th house there. You know, in a certain way, here's what I would say about this. Uranus itself in the 11th house, just taken out of context, typically Uranus in the 11th house means that there is a real long-lasting social impact somehow. So when I'm doing my sessions, that word somehow is I use that often. Somehow he was there was the impact could have been somehow some kind of social change somehow. The Uranus is also the planet of any kind of civic, social, or community, altruistic, cause-related, even semi-political consciousness. So,
oh my God, this is so bang on with Michelangelo. The Sistine Chapel, his statue of David. They changed the form of art in art and artists in medieval Europe and art forms. And Sistine Chapel is one of the best artistic forms known in the world. I mean, you couldn't have been more bang on with that.
Well, somehow, yeah, there's, Uranus can be quite radical. Uranus is the iconoclastic bomb throwing, hurling a grenade into the room. Let's just see what happens. Damn the torpedoes. We don't care about the fallout. So his is connected with Venus then. And so that's, there's that, it makes also a reference in a practical way, since the 11th house is money earned from a person's profession, that his income could have been, and there could have been a real roller coaster associated with Uranus there. Uranus might be a bit like the nodes, like Rahu-Ketu, in terms of inconsistency and eccentricities. But since Uranus is the planet of freedom, and it's very high in the sky in his chart, he was quite an independent spirit. But I think also, maybe I'm not remembering his biography well, but I think that he was gay. I mean,
You're right,
I don't care
right.
one way or the other. Doesn't God bless everybody? But Uranus is opposite Venus, so I think being gay back in those days was pretty accepted, especially if you were an artist. But so that we could, when Uranus is connected with Venus, a person has really eccentric or erratic or inconsistent relationships. I mean, even by the standards of his own time, some of that might be a bit, his love life might have been a bit unusual. I'm going to use those kind of euphemisms.
Right.
But what's also very interesting to me in this chart, I'll have to admit, I haven't seen this chart for decades, is that Pluto, he has a Pluto-Rahu conjunction in the 10th house, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I actually do know how to read these things, but so Pluto and, these two planets magnify each other. Rahu exaggerates whatever it contacts, and Pluto does the same thing. So in the 10th house of his career, no wonder he's still famous now. I mean, here we are, you and I, contemporary women, talking about this nice man from 500 years ago. Why is that? It could be associated with Pluto. We can make that case.
And it gave him wealth. It gave him name and fame. If I look at it from the KUBERA point of view, I can make it like that. It gave him so much of wealth, so much of name and fame, that he's known, as you just rightly said, 500 years down the line, he's still known, and his name and fame is everlasting. Pluto,
it appears to be. And then, obviously he has, so Pluto from its position in the 10th house also aspects his Mars and Sun. And so So Pluto is the planet of obsessions and compulsions. So I think that once he got started on an idea, you have to have that level of propulsion forward that Pluto gives. When to reach the levels that he did in his profession, he had to be obsessive about certain things and had to be really compelled to carry on, no matter how that happened.
And he also said Pluto gave shadow issues. So, and it's with Rahu, a shadowy planet. So this could have absolutely magnified, don't you think so?
Yeah, it did. Now, typically when I call it, okay, so there's also, the general word complexity, wherever Pluto is, just to keep it from sounding terribly dreadful, I say it's complex. So, but how would we make a comment? I mean, how could we identify this as, he had a complex career? Okay, sure. I don't know how we even justify that statement.
I could help you there, because he had not been paid for all that he did for the Sistine Chapel. He was not paid. In one single line, the Pope told him that you have done it for your religion. Why are you asking money for it? Why are you asking a payment for it? So his 10th house does have its own set of complexities. All thanks to, and he had to bend backward to paint that chapel because it's a dome. So he had to bend backward to paint the entire thing. Paint fell on him, on his face and his clothes. That's a secondary matter. Paint fell on his eyes, on his mouth, on everything. And yet, after all, if you can't call this complex, what else would you? That you do a literally back-breaking job and you're not paid for it.
Well, okay, thank you for that point. Yes. So I think that one of the more obscure, or maybe not in India, but more of the obscure references to the 10th house as being a temple builder. So he's famous for his work on the Sistine Chapel, as you mentioned. But he's also got that combination between Pluto and Mars. We would say that Pluto is the higher octave of Mars. Right. Pluto's like Mars on steroids. And so when they're combined, you'd have to kill him to get to stop him. There's just that interior reservoir of energy, grit, guts, and focus. I
get you loud and clear. I get you loud and clear there, because I've been working on his chart for some time now, and for my other courses. Yes, for my other courses, and he didn't care about the money he earned. That's the best part. He was so obsessed. Anything that he saw, he would pick up and either start painting or carving. So as you just said, that Pluto gives you that kind of obsession, and Pluto, Mars and Rahu is like obsession at its highest. So on steroids. So
certainly a divine obsession. So then if we look at the planet of the divine, that's just my simple code for Neptune. So it's in the 12th house. I don't know about his Neptune doesn't look dysfunctional to me. I'll be honest with you. What I look at mainly is not necessarily the position of these planets in the houses, but what other other planets they combine with. So Michelangelo has the Pluto, Mars, Sun, Ketu opposition, conjunct Rahu. Okay, we've discussed that. He's got the Uranus opposite Venus aspect. But Neptune seems to be minding its own business there in the 12th house. I would say that since Neptune is also the planet of enthusiasm and being inspired, I think that was just always in the background for him. He could have been, typically Neptune in the 12th house can be actually quite meditative and interested in solitude and sadhana. I don't know. I honestly don't know how that worked out in his life, but
he was an eccentric of sorts. He was eccentric of sorts, and he preferred solace in his work. And rather than socializing, a handful of students around here and there were enough for him to keep him busy. He didn't really need, even though he was such a well-known person, he didn't need any company.
Yeah. Well, so in his particular instance, as far as I can see, I think that, you know, Neptune was sort of minding its own business, as I so quaintly say. You know, when Neptune is dysfunctional, it can make a person self-destructive. So, of course, you know, Neptune has to do with wine, and I'm sure he could probably drink a glass or so of wine, but I'm not speculating about that. At least it's not dysfunctional.
Yes, it's not dysfunctional. And for a lady who said that she could think on her toes, you were so bang on and point on. I'm so glad we took up this chart impromptu to do the reading. Everything that you said, and you've not seen. I like a youngster told me once that, you know, you should always have the respect for practice rather than skills, because practice always will have a go ahead over skills any day of the week. And you were so bang on with 50 years of practice, just reading a chart with so much of confidence, not seeing the chart for years together, not knowing the bio, having so thoroughly. It was amazing, Charlotte. It was amazing.
Well, you are too kind, dear. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for coming over. We look forward for more from you, Charlotte. Thank you.
Oh, well, I am at your disposal, dear. It was a pleasure and an honor, and I send you off with my very best wishes. Thank you for your work in educating the next generation of Jyotishis. I'm very grateful to you personally for doing that, dear. So, thank you.
Thank you.